And my guest today is Len Ward from Ward Consulting. And we're going to talk about something today which I'm not sure we've talked about in a long time, maybe a year or two on this show. And that is the residual value of a customer and a customer acquisition cost. And that's what we'll start with Len, because he's an expert on that stuff. And let's bring him in and start the conversation. Hey, Len, how are you today?
How are you? Thanks for having me as a guest today.
My pleasure. So, Len, what is customer acquisition cost? Let's start there because I'm going to bet most people listening to this don't know what that means.
Yeah, actually, you'd be surprised how many companies, if you sit down and say, what is your customer acquisition cost? They may know the term, they've heard the term, but they don't really know what it is. Customer acquisition cost is exactly what it sounds. It's how much it costs to acquire your customer. There's two main components within a customer acquisition cost. It's your investment in sales and your investment in marketing. An accurate customer acquisition cost or a profitable one is how you allocate those investments within that number, and hence that's how your customer acquisition cost arrives.
So, one of the things I see people talk about all the time is they look at the marketing cost for acquisition occasionally,
Mhm.
if they actually do that metrics, but they almost never look at the sales cost, which includes the cost of a salesperson.
Mhm.
For example, if you have a salesperson and they close 50 deals a year and you're paying them $100,000, your cost just for the sales part of the acquisition is $2,000 a customer. So once you understand that number, what should you do with it?
That, so I'll kind of come at it from a different angle. It's amazing how many times when I'm working with a client or I'm working with a company, and you are right, they will only look at the results on marketing. They will say, well, marketing generated me this many leads and marketing did this, and they will not even allocate the sales in any capacity. One of the most staggering things that I come across with companies from large to small is their investment in marketing compared to sales, which the number, like you just said, is actually relatively small. If you actually go into the customer acquisition cost, they may only be spending roughly 10% of the customer acquisition cost on, say, the agency or the marketing manager, and maybe another 10% on the actual investment in paid digital, maybe traditional, whatever you would consider paid for marketing. And then they're making wholesale decisions on their entire market sales and marketing strategy on basically evaluating 20% of their customer acquisition cost. And how you make the proper estimate, the proper, come up with a proper idea of whether this is working or not is, do we have these two blended and working together? So hopefully that kind of answers your question, but it's a problem that a lot of companies just simply gloss over and overlook.
Out of curiosity, I know what my answer is to this.
Mhm.
What should the customer acquisition cost as a percent of its lifetime value probably be at the top?
Typically, a number you should shoot for is 3 to 1. So for every dollar you're investing, you're getting $3 back in a lifetime value of a customer. Now, some companies may not be able to operate profitable at that number. Some companies may need to be at 5 to 1, 6 to 1, 7 to 1. So for every dollar they put in, they need to get seven back because of what's happening on their operating expenses and their cost of goods sold. The caveat to that, the problem is though, is that let's just say you're dealing with a customer who they're in a lead generation model, meaning to get to their revenue, they need XYZ amount of leads. And these leads literally have to come from either the sales staff, beating down doors, or more importantly, they have to really vet their money towards, say something like Google AdWords. Google AdWords prohibitively is the most expensive part of marketing out there. If you are at that mercy, the problem is Google's going to dictate what your customer acquisition cost is. So your investment in Google AdWords to try to feed that dragon of the leads you need for a good close rate could actually upend that 3 to 1 and bring you down to a 2 to 1 to 1 to 1. The question you have to ask yourself is, these customers, are they one-off, or is this customer somebody that I can build over the next 4 to 5 years, and my lifetime value could just grow with them going forward? But a long-winded answer, 3 to 1 is typically the one that is the number that I have clients say, let's shoot for that, and let's take a look at the back end of your numbers to see what works.
And I assume that 3 to 1 is the first year of sales, not the entire lifetime of sales.
No, first year is what you would go for.
Yeah, yeah. And there are industries, for example, the wealth management business, which we're talking about beforehand, where you have a recurring revenue with a client for typically 15 to 20 years, you could go as high as 150% of the first year's revenue, and you still have a very, very profitable sales process.
You do. You know, the problem with the customer acquisition costs and what customers feel as if the acquisition should be, this is kind of me more living in the digital world for a minute, is the return on investment is not, or what they're looking to get out of a dollar is not really, it's not really accurate. 10, 15 years ago, when the internet was kind of fairly new, and I don't like to call it new because it wasn't even aging at that point, even say 7, 8 years ago, it was fairly easy to acquire a lead, and you can acquire a lead fairly affordably. Now, with more companies jumping into digital, especially now with the lead pool kind of drying up because of the economy, it's getting very cost prohibitive. Customers really aren't, they don't really understand the metric of how much this costs. And when you are at that stage, you then have to take a step back and say, I might need to look at my operating expenses. Maybe I need to downsize my office. Maybe I don't need to have all these company cars. Maybe if my leads are coming from Google and if I'm on the wealth management side, maybe I should make, those seminars I like to have at the hotels where I'm providing dinner, although from a wealth management standpoint, I know that's a great lead gen. But maybe if you are getting better leads out of Google, you may have to say we have to cut back on that. The biggest problem we face is that the number one way clients find most companies is through a search engine, is from digital marketing, and yet that's the very first thing that companies cut. And it's something that I think as we come out of this recession, if it is a recession, I think more companies are going to understand that, and digital is now going to take, kind of move to the forefront, which is going to really mess up a lot of people's customer acquisition costs, to be honest with you.
Well, most of our listeners are blue collar businesses, primarily in the construction world, maybe manufacturing.
Mhm.
And those folks have a real advantage when it comes to getting found online.
Mhm.
And that's if they focus on Google reviews. And we've got several customers who have put themselves right at the top of the list doing one thing. They ask everybody they do work with to leave them a Google review.
Mhm.
And they get 30, 40, 50, 60 Google reviews, and the next competitor has 10. So Google throws them right at the top of the list, which is a really it's almost a free way to get your name out in front of somebody. And the truth is, if you're in the construction world, how do people find you? I mean, it's either through word of mouth,
Mhm.
which is a great way to go, or they go to Google and they start searching painting companies or roofing companies, which is what we do. And
Right.
then we start doing a dive into that. So what should somebody have? Let's assume that's how people are being found. What should those links go to?
Well, I think the larger question of that is you have to think of the individual who is looking to hire a painter or looking to hire a construction company. Now, the reality of it is over the last 2 years, I would say, maybe 18 months, clients are going on, they're going to Google, they're searching it, and they're basically filling out 10 forms and hoping and praying somebody comes out and gives them an estimate. And then hoping and praying of the estimate that they take, which is pretty much a first estimate, that the person's going to show up and do the job. I do consult with quite a few people in that industry, and it's been easy. Let's be crystal clear. The industry's been
Yeah,
very easy
the
to get
last
work.
couple of years it's not been challenging to get work.
No, that will change. So if you do
Yes.
not know your numbers, if you're not a master of your numbers, if you don't understand your customer acquisition cost, and more importantly, the buyer's journey, Jenny and Mike, how they start looking for a plumber or how they start looking for a painter, and how they get all the way to the point to the end of where they are with the painter. So you said the reviews. That's the vetting process, which we call the consideration stage, consideration purchase. So that's one way in which that's a great, more affordable way in which you can put your customer acquisition cost investment. Another thing is obviously you can do the awareness. I won't go all through the buyer's journey, but it's really understanding the entire buyer's journey of how an individual arrives and purchases your service and understanding the holes you have in that marketing chain. So do we not have enough money where we're generating leads? Maybe we don't have enough money where, that individual who had their house painted, we can also do roofing or we can do bathroom additions. Maybe is there a way we can invest in them to kind of invest in a marketing plan to bring them back? So it's really understanding how to allocate that customer acquisition cost all the way across the buyer's journey. Because the reality of it is that, and I'm not, there are a lot of very talented people in the construction industry. You can't not be talented. I mean, if you think about what they're doing. But at the end of the day, you are selling the same service. You really are selling the same service. You're selling the same type of thing. You're not Netflix. You're not Uber. There's no purple cow per se. So it is the way you compete and the way you will beat your competitors is by understanding that entire buyer's journey, how to allocate your customer acquisition cost investment along that buyer's journey, and then staying consistent with it. And most importantly, making sure that you're not going to try to out optimize a bad spend, which means you're not going to basically say, well, I can't afford that or I can't afford this. You have to understand that you, unfortunately, if you are looking for leads in the construction industry, you are at the mercy of Google, Facebook, and so forth right now.
The truth is, for me, the buyer's journey has two distinct parts. There's the marketing piece, which is creating awareness, and then there's sales piece, which is creating customers.
Mm-hmm.
And the journey is, in the marketing side is how do you get somebody to be aware of who you are? And then once they are aware of who you are, how do you convert them into a customer? One of the things I see with my construction company is that they have almost universally terrible closing rates. They put out plenty of bids. That's not the problem. The problem is the amount of bids that they actually turn into work is often 10 to 15%. And that is a huge, huge waste of resources.
Yep, I couldn't agree more.
Do you have any suggestions for what you would expect people to do that would help them there?
That's a great question. That's actually the kind of stuff that companies will bring me in to help work on. So what I would do is I say first off, because that's the stage where they're ready to fire the marketing team. That's the stage where they're very ready to fire Sally, the marketing manager, or Jenny, who runs the digital agency. And I say, stop. It's not Sally and Jenny's fault. So we have a problem with closing. You are right. The construction industry, your close rate, you should be in the 35% rate on the close rate. I know there's companies out there that say they close 90%. No, you don't. The reality is the top close rate in most industries 25 to 35%. And that's really good. 15 is really bad. And you are right, construction, it is bad. A lot of times what I found is it's manpower for what's going on right now. They just simply put out all these quotes and they don't have the manpower to actually close the job. So what you need to do is step back and say, okay, we know what our customer acquisition cost is. I'm allocating a lot of my money towards generating leads. I'm generating a lot of leads, but my close rate's only 10 to 15%. So then you have to ask yourself, is it time for us to reallocate the customer acquisition cost? Not about adding more money, but are we producing enough leads? We are. So then it's maybe like, let's pull some money from Google AdWords. Maybe let's pull some money from Facebook or pull some money on some other type of creative. And let's allocate it over to, maybe we need to hire Mike. Maybe Mike's entire job at $50,000 a year, his entire job is to make sure that he's a customer service rep and make sure that these jobs get closed. He follows up with everybody. He does the follow-up email, whatever it may be. Maybe you need to allocate that money towards a CRM drip campaign where you're, even after they have the proposal, there's, 5 case studies in which Mike and Jenny can kind of go through it and say, hey, I think we're going to maybe sign with them. So what I'm trying to say is pull the money away from the lead gen stage, move it over to right there, which is the purchase stage. And that's kind of how you start manipulating and allocating your customer acquisition costs. So that's a good working study. If somebody is only closing 10 to 15%, get the money out of lead gen, move the money over, whether it's hiring or marketing or an improved sales process over to closing, because just by moving your close rate up to say 35% is going to help you convert more of the leads you have in, which hence makes you spend less money on generating leads.
Oh, here's the way I would put that to make it a little bit simple for some folks to do. If you're only closing 15% of your sales and you don't have a full-time salesperson on your staff, hire one.
Yeah.
And then learn how to supervise a salesperson to make sure they're doing what they do. If you're only closing 10 or 15% of your bids, it's because you're not following through. It's that simple. Or you're a terrible company. You better fix your company. But I would say that a really, really good sales process where you're actually qualifying your leads before you give them a proposal, which I highly recommend you do, can be as high as 50 or 60%. Right, it's never going to get to 90%. 90% only happens if 100% of your leads come from very strong, warm introductions And that almost never happens. Some of the design build contractors, that's how they work.
Mhm.
And when someone contacts them, if they get to a proposal with them or they give them the price, uh, they're going to be a customer
Yeah.
unless something really horrible. But for most contractors, it really comes down to how can you show that you're a little bit different, a little bit better, and how do you help people make a decision you're the right one? I'm a big fan of a guy named Marcus Sheridan who wrote a book, They Ask You Tell,
Hmm.
or a big fan of the book. And in there, what he used to own a pool company, and what he did this 20-minute video about all the questions he would get from customers. And before he sent a salesperson out, he made a potential customer watch that video. Now, his closing ratio went from 15 or 20 up to about 50% by doing that. So it's a lot of time is what are the triggers in your sales process? And how do you get people to the trigger that creates customers? I used to own a food service and vending company. And our sales pipeline, the last step, if we got someone to take this step, 90% of the time they became a customer. And that step was really pretty simple. We fed everybody in the factory free for a day. So we brought in the food that we had, which was significantly better than anybody else's, allowed people to eat it, and it was really hard for management to say no after that. So our whole sales process was based on getting the free feed with a qualified customer, obviously.
Hmm. Yeah,
Does that make
and
sense?
that does. So that food is part of your customer acquisition cost, the money you're actually spending on that food.
Well, the
That's
whole thing
actually,
was. I mean, we would send a whole team in there to answer
yeah. So
questions, and
and that's
go ahead.
that I think is the biggest problem is that when companies come in, that's a good point because when companies come in and they make an investment, and I actually have a video on this on my site. It's amazing how a marketing agency will sit down, and I come from a background where I've run a digital agency for 20 years and so forth. I've been an entrepreneur, so I truly understand being on the other side of the table. It's one of the reasons why I started consulting in this. I need leads, 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 and I'm like, let's take a step back and let's look at your sales pipeline. Let's identify where the holes are, because the holes in the pipeline is exactly where your investment in marketing needs to go, in sales and marketing. Not, I just need leads. I can't tell you how many times we've dealt with companies. We generate them 500 leads. They come back and they say, years ago, well, we haven't closed anything. Well, yeah, because your actual closing rate right there, which is what you just said, your closing process, there's a gaping hole and there's nobody there to fix it. And I think that right there is the fundamental problem facing marketing right now at this stage. And that is because these companies are being told by other companies, we'll just generate you lead upon lead. And they're thinking the more leads we get, eventually the close rate will get better. My question is let's just say you're in a nice nice town or a nice city, and you're a roofing company. Well, we need 1,000 leads a month for roofs. How many people do you think really need their roofs done? And if they did, wouldn't that be an epidemic if there's 1,000 people that need roofs done on a monthly? And I would tell companies that, and they just kind of step back and look, and I'm like, it's that lead you get, like you said, vet it, make it quality, and invest in the nurturing of them all the way through the pipeline to eventually close. Stop making this about leads. And it's really not the business's fault. It's a lot of these shoddy digital agencies out there that are pushing this lead mentality. And I see companies just throwing really, really, good money after bad when they do that. It's a shame.
Yeah, I unfortunately have had that experience with digital agencies and Facebook ads. Is
Mhm.
that I've tried Facebook ads several times. I know it'll work for what I do. The problem is I've never had an agency that's worked on the right funnel with me for it.
Yeah.
What's the offer I should be having? What's the first step that we should have once someone comes through? And that's really, and I think we're finally at the stage where we're fixing that. But I got to tell you, I've been in the blue collar world, and now I'm in the consulting world, and it's been a challenge making that switch because it's a very, very different sales process.
Oh, you mean being a consultant?
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah, same.
Yeah.
It's a
So
very, it's it is truly unique. Yeah, it's definitely something which is very different. But it's funny because you say the Facebook ads and like the pay-per-click ads, and that's the thing. I think sometimes within the customer acquisition costs, I don't think companies understand the cost of that. Like if the bidding environment on Google AdWords is saying construction consultant near me is $100 a click, it's $100 a click. There's no magic to try to, hey, well, we can get that done cheaper, and they come back and tell you cheaper. Google's job is to try to make it $100 a click, and to somehow within the next 24 calendar months you get up to $200 a click. That's their business model. That's what they're trying to do. So if you're coming in saying you get it done for 50, the reality is they're just reducing audiences or changing this or changing that. You cannot optimize a bad spend, and you can't get around these behemoths. They do $40 billion a quarter, and there's a reason they do it.
Yeah. Well, look, Google has got their algorithms nailed down. And that's one of the reasons I think in the blue collar world, especially, that local, the local listing you get it takes work to get there, and it costs you some money to get there, but it's probably a lot less money than it is to click when someone's looking for roofers. For you to buy the ad there, you can be pretty high up on that page by doing some stuff that's relatively cost effective.
You can. The downside to that, and there's my digital marketing hat, is that's going to become a paid product soon. So they have
Well,
been
it
talking.
already is a paid product, but again, you're typically in the construction world, you're typically competing with other local businesses, not billion-dollar companies that have huge ad budgets.
Right.
You're going against Joe Schmo who's got 10 painters, or maybe 50 painters if they have a really big thing. And those owners have a hard time making big ad spends. They just don't do it.
Well, yeah, and I think as this economy washes out, the herd will thin. It's the ones that, like I said, it's the ones that really understand the investment, what they have to do to get there. But it's been the most important thing I can tell anybody in the construction business, man. If you know your numbers cold, if you know your customer acquisition costs, if you know the lifetime value, if you nurture the one individual who maybe there was just a one-off job, but you have their email, you have their contact stuff. Maybe they're not going to purchase now, but a couple years down the road, like look at it more than just a $5,000 job. Look at it as somebody that in the next maybe might hire you for jobs over the next 5 years. It's just a matter of how you're going to market to them. And understand the cost of that. You'll be much better set for the next wave of what's going to happen. I think but for now, a washout's coming. There's no question. It's going to be the people that really don't understand those numbers, or they're going to get impacted with this economy. It's coming.
There's no question about that. And Len, we're going to have to leave it there because we are out of time.
Okay.
So I'm going to bet you've been a great guest and you've got a lot of knowledge about this stuff. And I'm going to bet there's some people listening to this episode who are going to want to have a conversation with you. So how would they go about doing that?
Very easy to get a hold of. My website is ward.consulting. That's literally it, Ward, WARD.consulting. Just fill out a form, and all I simply do is we just jump on a video call, phone call, or if you're in the Philadelphia DMA, I'm more than happy to come out and see you, and we just have a conversation and see where you're at and see if there's any way in which I can help you.
Cool. Now, I've got two things I'd like you to do. The first, I've asked, I think this is the 400th episode I've done of this podcast.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'd like you to go wherever you're listening to it. We're pretty much everywhere you can find a podcast, and leave us an honest rating and review. It's really important for other folks to find us. You can say if you love us, you love us. If you don't, you can say that too. I'll just cry a little. But it's really important. I really appreciate you doing that. And the second thing I would like you to do is I have this program called the Financial Freedom Accelerator. And the whole purpose of the program is to help you become financially free from your business. Too many business owners are tied down financially to the business. They bought themselves a really nice job, but they haven't done anything that will let them become financially free afterwards. Now, if you want to get some more information about it, I hope you do. It's really easy to get. You go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/FFA call, one word, www.sustainablebusiness.co/FFA call, CALL, and you'll get a chance to get on our calendar. We'll have a call, and you'll get a chance to find out a little bit more about the Financial Freedom Accelerator really is and whether it might be right for you. So this is Josh Patrick. You're with Len Ward. You're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.